So now we turn to the Hun soul. And this, as I've suggested before, is the version of the soul that people want to have the closest relationship with, because it can really benefit the family. That they're more concerned of the harm that might come from the Po soul, the one in the ground, so they make sure that that one is not going to disturb us. But this is the one that could actually bring material benefits by in the case of the Shang dynasty, finding out information that could be conveyed through oracle bone divination. But in more contemporary times, people believe that their ancestors just are continuing to look out for them, and in a similar kind of way, they have maybe access to some stuff in the parts of the universe that we don't have access to, that they could maybe help to ensure the prosperity of the family. So how does that happen? These are fairly simple versions of what are called spirit tablets. And what you have is a posthumous name of the deceased there, and then it says that it's the place where the spirit goes, the spirit Shanwei in Chinese. But they can be more elaborate, especially if you are wealthy. I assume many of you have seen Mulan, and there's a great scene here where Mulan goes to the ancestral temple, the temple where her ancestors have these more elaborate versions of spirit tablets. And in this scene, you really do get a decent sense of how Chinese people think about this Hun soul, that somehow they are kind of out there in certain place, maybe up in the heavens, that this soul is a light one that rises up, but that when you call it down to earth through a ritual, then they can be present for you. So we have this wonderful scene. You should make sure you watch that if you don't recall it, and give you a sense of how they're talking about their descendants. And Mulan is trying to do something for the family, and so they want to make sure she succeeds, and that's very much the way Chinese people continue to think about this. Those who believe in spirits at all. Obviously, there are some who don't believe in this at all, but especially if we're talking about Taiwan, Hong Kong, overseas Chinese, these ideas are still quite strong. And under Marxism in China, there was perhaps a little suppression or teaching people that a more straightforward you die and that's it view of life. And so, many urban people have that kind of view today, but this kind of funeral and these kind of practices are still very common in China, especially now that there's a lot less restrictions on engaging in religious practices in China. So what does that look like in practice? Well, traditionally, people don't do this anymore, but traditionally the family would have gathered for certain times to all worship the ancestors together. And if you look carefully when you go through the webpage, you can see it's listing the different people in the family. They're all hierarchically arranged. It's a patriarchal family order, so the male head of the lineage is the first one and takes priority in that ritual. But a whole clan could be present, especially if we're talking about an important clan. They may have a lot of people present for a very elaborate ritual. A smaller clan, such as might be in a village, they might have a smaller version of this, but everybody would be engaged in this kind of practice in traditional Chinese history. In contemporary times, it might look more like this. A little bit less clan-based today and more nuclear family, but a typical Chinese home would have a place like this. If you couldn't afford a whole separate ancestral temple like Mulan, then you would just set aside a certain place in your home, and you could perform rituals there. So each of these is a spirit tablet for an ancestor. You can see there are some pictures over here, and there's some fruit. And so this is an ancestor, or your ancestors here. These are the ones that you're going to communicate with on a regular basis. So perhaps every day you might put out some fresh fruit and perhaps even communicate with them. The spirits will partake of the essence of the fruit that will keep them going, and then we will ultimately eat the remainder of that blessed fruit. At a larger scale version of this, we can see at a Confucian temple, and it's not only in Confucian temples where this happens, but certainly that's one of the major places where we can see this tradition and practice today, where on Confucius's birthday there are very elaborate rituals, and this one happens to be in Taiwan, in Taipei. Actually, maybe that one is in Taichung, but a very elaborate ritual will take place where they offer perhaps a whole pig that's been roasted and some wide variety of different foods. They make a whole feast, just like they did in the Shang Dynasty. And the idea is that you want Confucius to thrive in his current mode and mode of being. But at the same time, there are other times, not just on his birthday, there are other times when you might want to call on Confucius. And traditionally, every city of any size at all would have had its own Confucian temple. And there are still a number of them left, especially in places like Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore, where this is still widely practiced and believed. But even now in mainland China, for a while they were kind of closed down. Now they're back online. And what happens is, if you're a student and you want to take the tests to get into college, that this is the kind of place that you might go. You would go to Confucius, you might buy a certain amulet, and you would go up to the spirit tablet for Confucius in the Confucian temple there, and make the right, bow down before Confucius and throw in some money as an offering. Instead of offering food, it's easier to just throw money, and the money will be used to pay for the daily offerings to Confucius. So this is still very much a living tradition. It has a family version, but it also has a larger social version. Here you can see what that Confucian temple would look like. Something like that. There's different temples. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Okay, so you can now move on and think about the differences between the Shang version and the contemporary version. And then I'll be back with another lecture soon.